I'm Kathy Van Ness from the Golden Door, and it's our speaker series night. And I'm excited to share with you a very special person, Anna Cummins. She is a remarkable young woman who's doing a lot about our planet. And this is Cooking School Week. We're having a lot of fun with cooking school for those of you who are here for that week with cutting skills, and you're going to have a fish class later on in the week, which I know it's going to happen. That class is going to be amazing. But tonight, what we want to add to your experience is a little bit about the world and how the world affects us, certainly as far as what we eat and what we do every single day. So Anna Cummins has led the effort to research aquatic plastic pollutions and to find solutions in regaining a plastic-free ocean. Her mission is to empower people to become leaders in combating the global health crisis of plastic pollution, and I'm sure much more. In 2001, she received a fellowship from the Sustainability Communities Leadership Program to coordinate bilingual outreach and community relations for the nonprofit Save Our Shores. She joined the Algalita, hopefully I said that right. Algalita Marine Research Foundation as an educated advisor in 2007. In 2008, Anna completed a month-long 4,000-mile research expedition studying plastic debris in the North Pacific Gyre. The journey inspired her and her husband, Dr. Marcus Eriksson, who I now know is Icelandic a bit, to co-found the Five Gyre Institute in 2009 with a goal of communicating marine plastic pollutions on a global level and engaging in community solutions. So the first question all of you are going to ask is what, and I'm going to answer for you because I know you're going to answer because I've got great ones for you. What is a gyre? Some of you don't know, and trust me, I didn't know until I met this young lady over here. Our ocean, if you can imagine, is a network of currents that circulate around the world. So just imagine all of the planets and all of the land masses as they come back into the ocean. And the circulating water that comes off all of these continents makes a gyre, which I have that right finally, right?
Perfect.
There are 5 massive, slow, rotating whirlpools on our planet. There's probably little ones, but there's 5 big ones, right?
There's 11 total. But
there's 11
yeah,
total, but there's the 5 really big ones, right? I got this. I knew the person there. And they accumulate stuff, a lot of stuff. Wait till you hear what they can accumulate. And because petroleum plastics are designed to last, the plastic trash will remain in the oceans for decades or even longer. In the ocean, sunlight and waves cause floating plastics to break into increasingly smaller particles, but they never completely disappear or biodegrade. They become sponges or contaminants. So now one of my favorite questions, which you're not even going to believe this. The Pacific Ocean Gyre has caught the public's imagination to the point that many are aware it exists. And plastic pollutions hit news again in the search for the flight MH370 in our southern Indian Ocean. But do you think there's enough awareness regarding the scope of this problem?
Well, first of all, I'm so impressed with the research that you did. I'm going to bring you along to all of my presentations. You can do the whole spiel yourself. So there's never enough awareness on any sustainability issue. I am really inspired with how much this issue has grown. I mean, unfortunately, it has grown in terms of the scope of the issue, but grown in terms of public awareness. So when I first heard about this issue of plastic pollution, I'd grown up doing beach cleanups. I'm from Santa Monica, went to a progressive high school. I cared a lot about the environment, and food was really what inspired me to go into the environment. But I heard a lecture in 2001. I had already decided to pursue sustainability as a career path. I was pursuing a master's in environmental policy, and I heard a lecture in 2001 from this man named Captain Charles Moore, who was the first person to really go out and publicize plastic in the North Pacific Gyre, which Kathy's already so eloquently described. And I was stunned. I was in graduate school in Monterey, this hotbed of marine conservation, and no one was talking about plastic in the ocean. And what I heard in that lecture was that there's this massive rotating current system in the Pacific, as far from land as you can get, in the middle of the ocean, and it's filling up with plastic waste, with all the disposable packaging and all of the stuff that we are inundated with in our culture. And it flows into our oceans from accidental litter, from poor waste management, from so many different ways. I mean, you don't have to go far to see plastic in our streets. It washes its way into the oceans and gets swept up into these currents where it persists indefinitely, breaking down into small pieces, getting into the food chain. So that was in 2001. And I was haunted by this image So I started really stalking Captain Moore until I was finally invited out to see it for myself. So, you know, I got more involved, I volunteered, and eventually was invited out in 2008 to see the gyre. And that was what inspired Marcus and I to start this new organization. Now in 2016, plastic is the subject of major global conferences. I'm going to the State Department in September where John Kerry has started this conference. It's now in its third year, called Our Oceans. And plastic pollution is one of the main topics of conversation. There are new coalitions coming together. There's global leaders from around the world that are really looking at this at the UN level, at the UNEP level. But is there enough awareness? No, there's never enough.
Well, how about this? How many people here? Is anybody here from Texas? Okay. There is an island of garbage twice the size of the state of Texas inside the Pacific Ocean in the North Pacific Gyre off the coast of California, right? Somewhere out in there,
Yeah,
in that big gyre.
it's not quite an island in the way that we would imagine you could walk on this field of garbage. I expected to see the island the size of Texas when I went out in 2008. And what I saw instead was blue ocean as far as your eye can see. But when we pulled up our nets, every single sample we collected from Hawaii back to Los Angeles was full of plastics. And I actually brought one of those samples just to give you a little visual. So this is one sample. This would probably be about 2 football fields in area, skimmed back and forth with a net. This was a trip with Captain Moore.
Yeah.
And you can see it's disgusting, but it's actually a fairly small quantity for that area of ocean. But you think about the entire Pacific Ocean, and it amounts to a tremendous amount. I'll give you the sum total. This was actually the trip that Marcus proposed to me on. I had known him for a few months. He was the director of research and education. We were out in the middle of the gyre, and he made a ring out of plastic debris. He fished up some derelict fishing gear and proposed, and I said yes.
It was irresistible.
Yes, it was irresistible. And I think it would have been a very long journey if I'd said no. We were only 6 people.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not an island in the way that we've imagined, which makes it more challenging really to engage people. Because if we could take photographs of this island, we would really be able to galvanize the public. Instead, we're now calling it more like a plastic smog.
Well, I got a number. Tell me if this makes sense. The number of floating plastic pieces outnumbers the total marine life, something like 6 to 1.
Well, that stat it might be a little misleading. I'll tell you how much is out there.
Yeah, how much? We want to know.
So we started 5 gyres because we realized this is a global issue, but no one knows about the Southern Hemisphere. There's a South Pacific gyre, a South Atlantic gyre, an Indian Ocean gyre, and a North Atlantic gyre. And there was zero research on the Southern Hemisphere. So we thought, let's start this organization, let's do the science, let's get to all 5 gyres, publish the findings, and then use this as leverage to really try and drive solutions. So what we found in all of these expeditions, we would invite other scientists, journalists, filmmakers, everyday citizens who wanted to get out and see this to come on board, get inspired, and go back to their communities. So that sum total, with all of our data, plus 7 other scientists from around the world, was 269,000 metric tons. Wow. 269,000 metric tons of plastic from 5.25 trillion particles.
Wow, that's a little hard to imagine.
Hard to imagine, but
so who would clean? Is there any thought of this? Who could clean this up?
people have tried
difficult
to come up with solutions. You can't really clean it up at sea. So one of the big messages we're trying to convey is that if we're going to stop this problem, we have to go upstream. We have to look at our packaging. We have to look at the way we use and dispose of plastic. We have to look on a very individual level about the things that we use every day. And on a city level and a country level, we have to look at our policies to regulate the way companies make this stuff.
Did you notice at Golden Door we do not have plastic water bottles?
I did notice that.
Yes, I knew that
Yes.
for a long time now. According to the conservative energy future, plastic is the most common element found in the ocean. Is that true? As far
Common element in
as
terms
far as
of
hard debris.
Well, yes. I mean, plastic is the most common debris. Roughly 80% of the debris, and when you think about debris, you think about harmless things like logs and coconut shells. Really, the vast majority of it is plastic. 80% of what we find out there is plastic.
And the plastic actually, as it breaks down, doesn't it also leach itself?
Yeah, so all of the different plastics that we use, from water bottles to baby bottles to toys to you name it, we have the plastic itself, but then we have chemicals that we add, plasticizers that we add to plastic to give it its different properties, to make it durable, to make it flexible. And those plasticizers, things like phthalates, things like bisphenol A, a lot of these are hormone mimics, or they can be estrogen mimics. They're endocrine disruptors. Those can leach not only into the water, but those can leach into the food that we eat, into the water that we drink, and ultimately wind up in our bodies. And you know, because I've told you this, before I got pregnant, we did a body burden study on my blood serum to find out what is my body burden, what are the chemicals that I carry just as a result of living in this consumer world that we live in. And we found trace levels of flame retardants, of DDT, of PFCs. We found all 4 contaminants that we were looking for. And, you know, although they're tiny, tiny quantities, these chemicals in the body of a woman, we can pass these on to the next generation. And I probably did the best cleanse that I could by having a baby.
I remember that.
Which is
so I want you to share one of your favorite. I'm going to ask you 2 different questions, almost the same. But the first, share what is one of your journeys with Mark on the boat.
With Marcus?
Yeah, with Marcus. Exactly.
Yeah.
Share one of those journeys. What's it like? Because we want to be on the boat with you, and what is it that happens?
Well, we'll start with our honeymoon voyage.
Maybe not that much.
So for our honeymoon, I won't. Yeah, no details. Well, there was nothing romantic about a honeymoon with 12 other people on a small sailboat in January. And we learned that that's not the right time to cross the Atlantic. You know, I had imagined that I might get claustrophobic being on a small boat with so many people. And what I found was the reverse, is that, you know, we live on a water planet, but we don't really realize it. And when you cross an ocean from point A to point B, you realize that our planet really is mostly ocean. And to be out, you know, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 miles in the middle of nowhere, this isn't favorite, and it's not a positive thing, and to pull up a sample and see remnants of our consumer culture so far from land is just mind-blowing. You know, for so long we thought of the oceans as infinite. Yeah. And today we say, where there is seawater, there's plastic.
What's the worst thing you ever saw out there on one of your journeys?
Probably pulling up a big plastic bucket and realizing that inside was a triggerfish that had grown up inside this bucket and had grown too large to actually swim out. So we did cut the bucket, and then we had a marital argument about letting the fish go versus cutting it open to see if there was plastic in its stomach.
Who won?
I hate to say it. I'm not going to say it.
Yeah, no, maybe not.
The scientist won.
What would you think, outside of plastics, what's the number 2 thing? Is it the number 1?
I wouldn't even say that plastics are the number 1
What's
thing
the number
facing
1?
Oceans. Climate change, acidification, and they go hand in hand, and overfishing. Yeah. You know, we're actually changing the ecosystems by removing so much life and making it very difficult for oceans to bounce back.
Well, talk a little bit about your foundation and what you're doing today.
So, you know, I mentioned the first few years were really just focused on let's get out to sea, let's do the data, let's try and engage with the public and share what we're finding. We had a surprising finding in 2012, not in the oceans, but actually in the Great Lakes, that really inspired what we're doing today. So we thought, you know, how can we engage with people on ocean issues who don't necessarily live on a coast? We're very lucky to be on the coast here, but most people don't live on an ocean. So we went to the Great Lakes. We partnered with an amazing scientist, Sam Mason from SUNY Fredonia. We surveyed all 5 Great Lakes, and we found more plastic by count in Lake Erie than any of the oceans that we had surveyed. And we had done some 50,000 miles of ocean at that point. And we pulled up this sample. I wasn't on board. I was about to deliver at home. And this sample had over 1,200 little plastic particles that were perfect little round spheres. And we were mystified until Marcus and Dr. Mason went to CVS, pulled out some personal care products, and there it was. Yeah. Facial scrubs, body washes, exfoliants, even toothpaste have been using these little microbeads that are made of plastic. They're too small to be filtered, and they go right through our wastewater treatment facility into the oceans, lakes, and rivers, but by the tons.
But isn't there legislation now starting to?
Well, that's the good news.
Yeah, because I know I came to the Golden Door almost 4 years ago, knowing you, and the first thing I said is, oh my gosh, we cannot have microbeads in our products. And literally, we reformulated every single product
Amazing.
right then and there.
Amazing.
Right then.
Fantastic. See, it can be done.
Immediately.
Yeah.
It took us a while, but we got it.
Yeah.
We've never had one single product on property that's not
Fantastic.
perfectly non-harmful.
Fantastic. Well, what we were able
tell me
to
what
do.
the legislation is then.
So it became a big coalition effort. So we did the science, and we took this to some big manufacturers, Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson. To make a very long story short, it took banding together as a coalition of groups. It was NRDC, it was Story of Stuff, it was Clean Water Action, many groups coming together, Surfrider Foundation. It took several years, but just in the final weeks of 2015, President Obama finally signed a national bill to ban the sale of products that contain microbeads. It first was on a California level.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And then that inspired. What happens in California can really influence
it's true.
the rest of the country.
Yeah. But I'm going to switch gears just for a minute. We know that U.S. landfills are overflowing with 2 million tons of discarded water bottles. Can your voice now move from oceans to lands, or will you stay primarily oceans?
The solutions are definitely on land.
Good.
The ocean is the not the final resting place, but it's, I think, this metaphor of finding this consumer waste and all this plastic pollution in the oceans is what's really galvanized the public. But the solutions are not in the ocean. The solutions are upstream.
Right.
It's with our habits, it's with our packaging, it's with the way we formulate these products.
So listen to this. I know you're going to recognize this is a bit shocking. Not only does our company focus on child abuse, which of course Anna knows, but we're really focused also on sustainability, the way we run our gardens, the way we do our food. We have very little waste. But wait till you hear these numbers and you'll find why in hospitality I am so bothered by plastic water bottles. Wait till you hear this. 1.5 million tons of plastics are used to bottle water annually. 1.5 million tons. The U.S. uses 1.5 million barrels of oil for plastic water bottle manufacturing. 1,500 bottles are thrown away every second. And 4 billion pounds of PET plastic water bottles end up in landfills or our oceans. You know, when I think of a campaign or a convention, which you've all been to them, and all of those water bottles at that convention, and then the second you take 2 sips, there's a whole new crowd out there. I'm horrified coming into this industry from fashion and seeing the amount of human waste as far as plastic water bottles, which is why the first thing we did here is we cannot have this at Golden Door. My question is can you tell us why are we still doing this?
Marketing.
Really, they're making a fortune.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I think in my life, no one was using plastic water bottles when I was a kid. We used drinking fountains, and we didn't become dehydrated because we weren't carrying around water all the time. I think it was marketing that made you feel like if you carry that accessory, you can be beautiful and hydrated, and
But we know
like
you
all
don't
the
need
models.
to drink water every single minute.
Yeah, I think it's just massive amounts of marketing dollars spent trying to dupe the public into buying these products. And it's not just water bottles, it's
So much stuff.
It's so much stuff. But what makes me hopeful on that is that, if we were able to create this problem in such a short period of time, we can certainly undo it. And it takes massive public awareness. We need top-down and we need bottom-up activism happening at the same time.
I understand it takes about 1,000 years for a water bottle to biodegrade. Does it ever?
It doesn't really ever
Right?
biodegrade.
I mean, 1,000 years, who would know? Who's
Yeah.
Oh, it's still there. Send me a
Yeah.
note. You
I mean, they haven't even-
it's just who would know, right? You'd have to be measuring it. I don't even think the person who wrote this has been here thousands of
Exactly.
years.
I think that, those statistics that you hear about, it takes
Yeah.
so many years for this and that to break down. It's one thing for a plastic water bottle to break into smaller parts, but for the actual polymer that makes up that plastic, for the actual tiny element that makes plastic what it is, that's the part that doesn't break down. It will still remain plastic.
Well, how about this? Oh, but it's made from recycled plastic.
I do want to say I'm not anti-plastic. People assume that I'm anti-plastic. I'm anti-disposable and I'm anti-bad use of plastic, but it is an amazing material. I mean, I own a lot of things that are made out of plastic.
But
It's
you're reusing
amazing in computers and cell phones and medical and on and on and on. But it's so recycled is a lot better if you can do
only 500
100%.
years.
What's that?
It's only 500 years.
Well, at
They
least
say, oh, recycled plastic's so much better for the planet, but it's not.
Well,
technically.
I guess what
Still
they're
waste.
saying, it is still waste, but if we could create a closed loop system, you take that bottle, it goes into the recycling stream, it's truly broken down and made into a new bottle. I mean, that closed loop recycling is a good thing, because we're not going to do away with
No.
plastics in my
No, of
lifetime
course.
or ever.
No, or ever. No, that's.
Nor do we necessarily want to, but what we
No.
want is to create what we're calling a circular economy, where we're not producing so much one-way garbage, but instead things that become raw materials for new products.
So what's the next step for you?
Well, we've been part of some really exciting conversations. You know, I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of groups are coming together now as a coalition, and that's really the only way that we're going to turn some of these issues around. So we're looking at a project where we can actually quantify which are the products that just need to go, things like plastic straws and stir sticks, and which are the products that need to be redesigned. And we're calling it the SIN list, Substitute It Now, SIN, and working with a number of groups to try and put some metrics around this. We have now straw campaigns and bag campaigns and bottle campaigns happening in isolation across the country and around the world. But could we come up with more of a unified way to work together on some of these things so we can actually scale the efforts? So that's
Wow.
one thing that we're looking
Wow.
at.
So are you developing what kind of campaigns?
So you know, first,
how do we really help get that? And we're here. How do we help get that awareness out of here?
so something else that we're looking at, we're looking at formulating a new campaign, and I can't quite say what it is yet,
Okay.
but I would love for people to stay engaged and go to our website and find out how they can get involved. You know, I think the first thing is people just starting with their own footprints. You know, it's great to get involved in an organization and get involved in policy, but what can you do with your very busy lives? And the first thing you can do is just look at your own footprint. Don't use plastic straws in restaurants. Don't use plastic bags. Try and replace a lot of these single-use things with reusables. And that can inspire people to share with their communities and want to take the next step and get more involved.
Wasn't there some legislation on plastic bags as well? Aren't we getting much farther along that pipeline?
Yeah, it took about 8
They
or
said
9
that would
years.
never happen, and
Well,
That's
it's
amazing.
happening, but it's still quite a fight. So it took about 8 or 9 years for many groups to come together, Heal the Bay and Surfrider and on, and pass the first statewide ban on plastic bags. But the plastic industry came together, spent a ton of money, millions and millions of dollars, to put that back on the ballot in November as a veto referendum. So the fight is still on, it's not over. You know, it was signed in 2014 and now it's back on the chopping block. So,
But myself as being a consumerist, I sort of feel that as much as the organizations are there, this is really a perfect consumer movement. Because if you go shopping today and you're in the grocery store and you see somebody or anywhere you're going getting the plastic bags out, and there you've got your, how many of us have, we have all our own bags. We all have our bags. How hard is it, right? You bring it in. And don't you, it's sort of, you look at that and you think, wow, why can't we all be the same? And consumers put this sort of, I don't know if the guilt's really the right word, but the sense of onus on everybody else, like we all need to be in this together. And consumers are powerful.
we're tremendously powerful, and microbeads were a great example of that. I mean, being able to pass a national bill, I think it really came from consumers saying, we definitely don't want plastic on our faces, not in our mouths, and we want to get rid of this stuff.
Wow.
One other exciting project that I'm personally excited about that we're working on, it's going to take a long time to develop, but we've been talking a lot about, just the movement, particularly sustainability movement, lacking diversity. And our own organization still lacks diversity, and it's something we're talking about. But we've been working on a partnership with a group called Latinas in Action, along with the U.S. Forest Service and Chico State University, to engage next generation advocates, really focusing on Latina leaders to become advocates and to get involved in this issue.
Yeah, that's important.
But just using this issue as a lens for public speaking, communication, leadership. So it's going to take a long time to develop, but it's something I'm really excited about.
So every time we end one of our interviews, which I have fun, you'd be surprised who we've talked to. I mean, our list of interview candidates is wonderful. We ask our guest to give to our guest a golden nugget. And so today I'm going to ask you, what if you can give our guest a golden nugget, what would it be? This is your chance to
Okay.
give them
golden
something,
nugget, a little
present.
well, a piece of advice that
yes.
was given to me fairly recently, and it's one I have to keep reminding myself of, is how important it is to fail. How important and okay it is to fail and learn from your mistakes. I can sometimes tend to be a little bit too careful, and giving myself this reminder that in order to really do something adventurous, innovative, risk-taking, you have to be okay with failure.
Oh, that's a
So
difficult
I'm trying to
one.
remind myself of that on a daily basis.